Okay, we're live. No technical problems this evening, folks. Thank you so much for your patience. So we have a great program for you this evening. So let me introduce the program and give you all a little background before I introduce our guests. So welcome to What the F is Going On in Latin America and the Caribbean, a popular resistance broadcast of hot news out of the region. In partnership with Black Alliance for Peace, Haiti America's team, Code Pink, Common Frontiers, Council on Hemispheric Affairs, Friends of Latin America, Interreligious Task Force on Central America, Massachusetts Peace Action, and Task Force on the Americas, we broadcast live on YouTube Thursdays, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. You can find us simulcasting on 3 YouTube channels, Popular Resistance or Code Pink Action, and The Convo Couch. Post-broadcast episodes can be found on Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Tonight's episode, North America's Trilateral Summit, also known as the Tres Amigos Summit. We have 3 guests, Marco Castillo, who is the co-executive director of Global Exchange, Alina Duarte, who is a journalist with Sin Censura, who will be joining us from Mexico City, and Jim Hodgson, who is a Canadian journalist living in Chiapas now. And also, all of you probably recognize my co-host, Raul Burbano from Common Frontiers. So Raul, say hello to everybody.
Hello, Terry. Hi, Jim. Wonderful to be here again, like always. Thank you for having me.
So let me give all of you a bit of background. It's a little lengthy for typical backgrounds for this program, but I think it sets us up really well for tonight's conversation. The objective in having 3 guests this evening is to have a representative from each of the 3 countries, Canada, United States, and Mexico. So here we go. Just a little explanation first and then some background. The North America Leaders Summit, which also is known as the Tres Amigos Summit or the Trilateral Summit of North America, is between the Prime Minister of Canada, the President of Mexico, and the President of the United States. The summits were initially held as part of the Security and Prosperity Partnership of North America, and that's a really scary sounding organization. It's a continent-level dialogue between the 3 countries. It was established in 2005, and it has had various iterations since then. So regarding January 10 of this year, which was when the 3 leaders of state actually met, the summit was actually the 9th, 10th, and 11th. Biden met with AMLO on the 9th. All 3 heads of state met on the 10th, and Trudeau met with AMLO on the 11th. So here's a little bit of background. The United States, Mexico, and Canada on Tuesday, January 10, vowed to tighten economic ties, producing more goods regionally and boosting semiconductor output, even as integration is hampered by an ongoing dispute over Mexico's energy policies. We've done a full episode on that, on energy policies in Mexico. U.S. President Joe Biden, Mexican President Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador, and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau met in Mexico City and pledged to beef up supply chains after weathering serious disruptions during the COVID-19 pandemic. Quote, "We're working to a future to strengthen our cooperation on supply chains and critical minerals so we can continue to accelerate in our efforts to build the technologies of tomorrow right here in North America," Biden said in a joint news conference. Lopez Obrador said the region would promote economic development by creating a committee for import substitution to make North America less dependent on other parts of the world. The White House said the 3 countries would improve legal pathways for migrants, and Lopez Obrador again urged Biden to press Congress to enact measures that would regularize the migration status of millions of Mexico citizens in the United States. Trudeau portrayed Canada as an original architect and the principal guardian of free trade on the continent, as he called for a new era of 3-way growth and he called on would-be investors to take a leap of faith similar to the one NAFTA pioneers did in the early 1990s. So I really wanted to read all of that to everyone because it really doesn't sound good. It really, I mean, it doesn't sound like anything really earth-shattering or transformative. And from probably US and Canada the most. I think there's things coming from Mexico that we can talk about that are transformative, and that perhaps the Mexican president is really pushing for that. So where would you guys like to start tonight? Jim's joining us as a Canadian journalist from Mexico. Yesterday, Raul and I had recorded a conversation with Marco Castillo, and he actually is Mexican by birth and lives in New York City. And we asked him to give us a perspective from the United States. So maybe we should start with that. And okay. So everyone, I want all of you to meet a great friend, fabulous activist, and someone who's been really supportive of our program. We have asked him to come back and share the perspective on the Trilateral Summit from a US perspective, but also Mexico too. So I want all of you to meet Marco Castillo. He is the co-executive director of Global Exchange in San Francisco. You will find in the program notes the link to his social media as well as to the Global Exchange website. So Marco wrote a fantastic article in advance of the Tres Amigos Summit that occurred in Mexico City on January 10, specific as to immigration and issues on the Mexico-California border. And that is a big part of his work as well. So welcome, Marco.
Thank you very much.
It's just always wonderful to have you as a guest. So honored to call you a friend and partner in crime with activism. So where's a good place for us to start here? Your article, let me just tell the audience, the article is entitled "Solving Immigration Starts with Helping Families Feel Safe at Home." And you're working on that multiple fronts. I guess we should probably throw out the Peace Summit too, that you're going to be hosting in Mexico City in February. So a big part of, well, maybe not as big of a part as we would like, of the Tres Amigos Summit or the North American Trilateral Summit did focus on immigration. But I have to say, from my perspective, reading the news post-summit, not enough was placed on immigration.
Right. It is pretty clear that the United States of America has the singing voice when it comes to immigration. Unfortunately, Mexico has been just, kind of accepting everything that the U.S. have been requesting, and this is no exception. Days before the Tres Amigos Summit, the Biden administration, Biden himself was at the Mexico-U.S. border, and from there he announced this new expansion of the parole program for Venezuelans to other countries, and it's it also announced that most of these asylum seekers will be sent back to Mexico, not even to their countries of origin. But anyway, it's a sad reality. It's a bitter note that came even before the Tres Amigos Summit. The U.S. once again trying to sustain Trump era policies that we thought that were long gone. They changed Title 42 to another new thing called Title 8, and they sustain most of the same restrictions. They expand a little window of opportunity, which is this parole that they're offering for some countries. But in general, they are announcing that they will be sending to Mexico most of those migrants that are currently at the border or in attempting to come, and the next, in the next weeks and for the, for the rest of our lives. I mean, hopefully that'll change, but that's what they're intending. And so it's a dark cloud over the potential that a meeting like the Tres Amigos in 2023, one might think that could bring.
That's a good point, Marco. I guess the comment is that AMLO is a progressive leftist, leader and has a lot of great policies. But it seems like he's kind of doing the dirty work for the United States around migration. Detaining migrants, in Mexico. Why do you think he's doing that? Like, what is he trying to get something out of it? Like, what would Mexico get out of it, or is it just that they have no clout and they have no choice? Like, what is it? What is in it for Mexico? Are they getting something somewhere else for that?
Yeah, well, there's many things that are at the table of negotiations, and unfortunately, I gotta say that in the political background, obviously, one of the main things is that Lopez Obrador is not new in these things, and he clearly knows that he needs to keep a hand, with the United States. If he was to break with the United States, as many of his critical sectors might expect, he will be, maybe facing a similar situation that the recently ousted president of Peru or in Venezuela we've seen. Obviously, the right in the United States is dying. It's anxious to throw a bunch of sanctions and threats to Mexico, and so he's been navigating these waters, and so that's one of the things to take into account. There's very little room for Mexican governments in general to say no to the United States unless you're ready to go into a war, if not with the whole country, at least with the conservative sectors that can make your life pretty difficult. But it's not only that, it's also trade, it's the USMCA. There's many elements that the US has to handle, and in the moment that the Lopez Obrador administration misbehaves, it's a moment where sanctions will start to come through, and investments will be limited. So he understands this dynamic, and he's been playing the role of trying to be a champion for Latin American politics, and at the same time he's trying to maintain good relationships with the United States. These things are very complicated because we, as progressives, wouldn't like to see that kind of bending, but at the same time, it's very hard to think that, we got to see that there's very little room. And finally, I also have to say something that I want to recognize from the AMLO administration is that there's many people that are calling, including migration experts, that have been calling that Mexico should not be playing this role, and Mexico should not be taking and accepting migrants that want to go to the United States. Yes, I mean, migrants should go wherever they want to go, but at the same time, Mexico, it's a country of immigrants. It has changed its face in the past decade, and Mexico has to have in place the policies to welcome all people in our country and allow them, for all of those who want to stay, to find a job, get into school, have access to healthcare. And so for me, that's the huge question. Okay, AMLO, you are accepting these terms. What are we as a country going to do to take 30,000 migrants and be able to, provide them with housing? Because what's going to be really unfortunate, it's to keep them in the shadows and keep them in shelters under terrible conditions. And that's another story. And that's really, really, really a bad thing.
The shelters are really more like warehouses. Literally.
Absolutely, they're at capacity, and they're not government run. It's not a public responsibility. They're run by civil society.
Let me, you've touched on jobs, trade. labor, and those are all things, particularly creating the three countries creating a unified, trade. And Trudeau actually called for something similar to NAFTA, which makes all three of us here just cringe to hear NAFTA, that term used. How much of this, and this is the sort of a little speculation on my part, but there was talk at the summit specifically about the semiconductor trade industry, about making that a hemispheric, and there will definitely be a need for labor for that. Canada and the United States are upset with the Mexican government's decision to nationalize lithium and to start controlling the electrical production, to have some of that natural resource sovereignty. The US and Canada don't particularly like that, specifically for foreign investment. But how much of this is about creating an economic bloc? And I specifically asked this, Marco, in relationship to AMLO reconvening CELAC after a 4-year pause, hosting that while he was still president of CELAC in September of 2021. So much of that summit was so many, it was foreign ministers and presidents, and so many national representatives mentioned, hinted on creating a hemispheric economic bloc to engage with the rest of the world, and using CELAC to do that. It seems to me that potentially AMLO is the bridge between CELAC, CELAC is all of the Americas with the exception of US and Canada. Is he sort of the de facto bridge liaison between what CELAC wants to do and being the person to integrate US and Canada to this? Or does he want two separate things, North America and the rest of the Americas?
I mean, I think it was really clear during the meetings that AMLO was trying to play that role, and it's almost an impossible game. I don't want to be pessimistic, but it's a really complicated one. The moment that AMLO, and stated that that the U.S., that these were his words, that the U.S. should end its history of looking down at Latin America, of oppression. He immediately found a wall from the U.S. Canada side. Biden immediately responded by saying, "There's no such thing. We treat everyone as equal. No one is investing in the region and in the world as the United States of America. There's nothing better that we can do." So obviously, the Biden administration, and I can say that Trudeau too, it's rejecting a Latin American perspective on for the U.S. and Canada, in like foreign relationships policy. So yes, I think that AMLO was very insistent and consistent in saying that this is about Latin America. This is a hemisphere that could be much more competitive, that could be much more united. And the United States was just dismissing that argument by saying it's the whole world, and we should continue to do it. And Biden mentioned Africa, and and try to play that game. And so I think in the case of the semiconductors, I think that, again, I think it's in the interest of the United States and Canada. I think it's also an opportunity for Mexico. We got to be really careful on how that comes down to, and what that comes down to, because if this means more bad, like poorly paid jobs for Mexicans, and like factories that are going to be oppressing workers, while the U.S. is going to take a cut in selling and merchandising and the benefits of it, it's going to be a rendition of that relationship that AMLO is trying to get away from. But yes, I agree that it's an opportunity, and Latin America should be more continue to engage and build. I mean, I just, listening to you speak, is why, I just, it was just almost cringeworthy to hear Trudeau, reference NAFTA, because
all of us involved in Latin America solidarity work, and especially people like you and Raul, who, immigration and labor, and particularly on the U.S. Mexico border. I mean, that's just, it's a cringeworthy statement to look at wanting to expand or recreate that sort of model. But that's
Right.
why I ask if these people are being deported, and many, you don't necessarily nowadays get deported back to your country of origin, your home country. You go to Mexico and other Central American countries. It's almost like they're creating a labor force for themselves. I
Absolutely.
mean, I kind of hate to say that, but it's really what it seems like, especially now wanting to have a Western Hemisphere semiconductor industry and everything
Absolutely.
that
I wouldn't be
entails.
surprised if creating a belt of poverty at the Mexico-US border, or something like that also in Central America, as part of the plan, of course. I mean, they've always talked about economic investments in communities and countries of origin to, stop migration, but we always know what that comes down to. I mean, it always comes to bad jobs, more corporations coming in, corporations that are trying to take advantage of natural resources while exploiting the people and their places of origin. So yes, I mean, I think that we as Latin American communities and countries, we should stay together, continue fighting to make sure that none of these plans turn into more oppression, but at the opposite, it pushes forward. It's something that it was good is that the three countries agreed on a 12 group of experts that are going to be exploring opportunities and new projects to integrate and further the integration of the region. And so this is a win for AMLO. I mean, it's like these 12 experts from the three countries are going to be looking to ways in which integration can be further, whether it's like migration or labor or education. And that's what AMLO has been pushing for. Like we should be treated as equal. Historically, Mexico has been treated as less, has been treated as the poor partner, as the backyard, and we need to end that relationship. And so
now you're the front yard. Now Mexico's the front yard too.
I mean, that's what Biden has said. But then again, when it's been asked to treat us as equal, then he says like, well, you're just like another partner. You're not part of the VIP. So that's what we need to continue to push.
Absolutely. But integration rarely, includes people, right? It's always, it's always marginalizing people from other countries. Integration is for corporations, it's for economic, it's for capital, but never for people. And that's, kind of we see in the militarization of these migration policies. But I guess for me, it's interesting that, certain countries are treated differently, obviously politically. Cuba, Venezuela, migrants from Nicaragua, they have, they're going to get treated quite differently if they cross the border, because they're coming from countries that are considered totalitarian according to the United States. But I guess the question we have is, often when we're talking about migration, we talk about when people get to the border and what are we going to do with them? Do we treat them humanely? Do we incarcerate them? Whatever. But we never talk about the conditions that create destabilization, economic despair in countries that make people want to leave. Because most migrants don't want to leave their country; they want to stay in their country. But when the economic or political situation is destabilized for many reasons, war, interference, people migrate. So if you take a look at Venezuela, you never had a large migration of Venezuelans to the north until obviously, the sanctions. The same with other countries, right? So can you talk a little bit about that and what that means? And was there anything discussed which I didn't see in this Three Amigos summit around, ending that destabilization, for example, ending the sanctions, that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. I mean, the short answer is no, nothing was talked about. And whenever it's been talked about, just like you said it, Raul, I mean, it's always the same. US aid investments, this jobs by sending corporations to the metropolitan areas. And there's no talk about the US responsibility in the militarization of the region, the proliferation of guns, the environmental devastation that has caused for long Canadian mining and other US businesses. And so like, just like you said it, Raul, I mean, who would, like, anyone in the audience, just like I would encourage, everyone to ask themselves, like, would you leave your home and everything you have with nothing in your hands to go to a new country? Nobody would do that. And obviously the crisis that we're seeing right now is a consequence of the regional policies, because it's a trend. It's not a random community in one specific place migrating. It's the whole region, Mexico and Central America. We must not forget that Mexican migrants continue to be the first numbers, some of the first ones in migrating. So it's not only Central America. And obviously, as you said, whenever the window is open, it's just with a political hook, because it's Venezuelans, it's Cubans, it's Nicaraguans, and trying to offer them a way out of not democratic countries, so-called. And in reality, I mean, it's upside down. Yeah.
Well, and it's Haiti now too, Marco. Haiti's been lumped in with Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. And what is that? And much to our consternation or questioning, the Mexican government is supporting U.S. policy towards Haiti.
Yeah.
And
that's really sad.
It's a conundrum to a lot of us, a disappointment and a conundrum, because there's so many things that we celebrate about the current government in Mexico. What is that about in your, I know I'm asking an opinion. I know the underlying thing is gang violence. That's,
Yeah. It's something that we all ask ourselves, because that's completely a contradiction from the Mexican tradition of non-intervention in any foreign conflict. But it's also clear that as part of a binational negotiation, AMLO sees Dominican Republic as part of U.S. territory or the influence. It's not necessarily Latin America, and so he's allowing the U.S. to take control of that and following their lead and in exchange probably for the respect of what Mexico is doing by supporting Cuba and other countries across the region. So it's part of those negotiations. And yes, it's really unfortunate, because Haiti and DR are like exact examples of what the consequences of U.S. interventions are, and particularly Haiti. It's a sad history of the U.S. Showing up, turning things upside down, going against the will of the people, destroying their countries and their societies, and then failing again and doing again the same. So somebody should be stopping that. Unfortunately, in this case, it's not in the plans of AMLO.
Oh.
Hey, Terry, are you there?
Yeah,
Okay, perfect.
I'm here. Sorry, everybody. Just
No problem.
multitasking my technical. So for the audience, our conversation really went into Haiti specific, and I'm going to clip that because it's that Haiti section. I'm going to clip it out and share it as a separate video, because it's a great follow-up to our anniversary broadcast, or Independence Day broadcast on Haiti. So I just want to give a shout out to Marco Castillo of Global Exchange. He, by the way, is the co-executive director of Global Exchange, which is based out of San Francisco. He lives between Mexico City and New York City, and we were just really lucky to grab some of his time yesterday. So now I want all of you, Raul and I both want all of you to meet our wonderful friend, Jim Hodgson, who we've done a lot of solidarity work. The three of us, our work has principally intersected in Venezuela, but we've done a lot of work in Colombia together, and Honduras as well, including solidarity work and election observation work. Jim has a fantastic resume that I want to read to you, if you give me just a minute. Because Raul and I are just, so honored to be his friend. So let me tell you a bit about Jim. So Jim is a Canadian journalist with extensive experience in Latin America and the Caribbean, Haiti too. So We should get you to comment on that, Jim. Over the past 4 decades, he has written for a variety of media and worked in the Dominican Republic for 2 years in the late 1980s and in Mexico for 6 years in the mid and late 1990s. There's that great NAFTA experience. Jim has also been involved with Common Frontiers, Raul's organization, and the Mexican Action Network on Free Trade. From 2000 to 2020, he worked with the United Church of Canada as Latin America Caribbean Program Coordinator. He currently is living in Chiapas, Mexico. And that's like, you just moved there, I think. So you need to unmute yourself.
Just a month now, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, Jim, you know, I met you as a journalist reporting on elections in Venezuela, and maybe we can start with you. As what do you see as a journalist? Tell us a little bit about your Latin American and Caribbean journalist, because you've worked all over. I say Venezuela because I met you there, but as your resume shows, it's much more extensive than that. What is your journalistic breakdown of the summit now that it's over? We're not seeing a lot of it in the media. And in fact, Raul and I commented on that before we went live, that, you know, there's very little follow-up. There was a lot of fanfare before the 9th, 10th, and 11th, and now it's just kind of, except for us, of course.
Yeah, it's a curious thing, and I as a journalist, like trained as a journalist, and even though I've worked kind of as a solidarity activist and used journalism skills for the sake of solidarity, I do go back to my training as a journalist and you know, ask, well, what is really going on here? And so over the weekend, I was reading the lead up to the summit, and I felt like a lot of the writing was poor. It was repeating, you know, talk lines from the State Department or the Foreign Affairs Ministry in Canada or Mexico, and not like asking serious questions or hard questions. Even on the immigration sets of issues, like one of the things that disturbs me is like the president of Mexico, Lopez Obrador, consistently raises development questions. It goes to the push factors. Why are people migrating? And even, you know, Biden went to El Paso, visited the border on Sunday, but there's never in US or Canadian media questions about why people are migrating. And I mean, right now, one of the big answers to that is one of the issues that brought us together, we three, in Venezuela: the sanctions against Venezuela, the blockade against Cuba, the newer sanctions against Nicaragua. Haiti is a bit of a different question. We can come back to that, but it's related too. Nobody is talking about why people are leaving. You know, we're not even talking right now about Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, which were the three largest contributors to the migration phenomenon on the US border. Another question: why doesn't Canada step in to assist Mexico with some of the migration sets of questions? Like with Syrians in Jordan, they went into the camps and interviewed people and, you know, kind of skimmed off the cream. There's a lot of Haitians sitting in Tijuana. Many of them are well-trained professional people. You know, so I mean, I'm just saying, I don't know that would be the right answer, but I am saying, why not ask the question? So the media before the summit wasn't even asking those kinds of questions, and then so then there wasn't much coverage in Canada or the United States. I agree with you on that. In Mexico, there was more, and I feel privileged to have been here the past few days to sort of see how it gets reported in the Mexican media. And again, there's like two sides to this. AMLO, President Lopez Obrador, is in a constant fight with the right-wing media, the kind of old mainstream Televisa, TV Azteca, the print media that are their subjects or their allies. They constantly criticize him over everything, anything, and so the other thing that happened over the weekend was the arrest of a prominent drug trafficker in Culiacan, and so the media in North America said huge gunfights in Mexico. Mexico's dangerous. Airports are closed, and without saying it's Sinaloa State, Culiacan City, some impacts in neighboring states, Sonora to the north, Nayarit to the south, but it was all Mexico is screwing up the drug war rather than, and again, I don't know that this is the right answer, but rather than looking seriously at what actually happened. They got a guy who was manufacturing fentanyl and exporting that to the United States. They got one guy. I mean, the whole system is still in place, but so I guess I just was like right off the bat, I was reacting to how the media were not covering adequately this potentially important event. And so, yeah, I hope in the conversation, we can come back to some of the excellent questions that you were raising with Marco, the relationship with the rest of Latin America, what's going on with the proposals around intervention in Haiti. But I'm in your
Well, you
hands.
should comment on that. You should comment on that because you have so much experience in Haiti. So why don't you expand on that? It's super important.
Just a little context. I started going to Haiti right at the beginning of my involvement in Latin America back in the 80s. So I was there first in 1984. Duvalier was still in power, the dictator. And then I lived in the Dominican Republic and went across to Haiti in 87 during a time. So the dictator had fallen, and there was a moment of this tremendous opening up of civil society, the trade unions, the students seized the cathedral and had like a teach-in for 3 days in the cathedral. There was this like effervescence in Haitian society, and I could feel the energy. And that energy 3 years later turned into the election of Jean-Bertrand d'Aristide, the priest who was kind of one of the leaders of a sector in the popular movements. And so I was there in 1990 as an election observer, and then the coup happened, and then more interventions, and everything that seemed like was being tried for good got subverted, I think, by an alliance between certain people in the United States and these 6 super rich families that kind of run everything. And those 6 super rich families are in league with the what are called the gangs. They're not that it's not that the gangs operate autonomously, it's that they are agents of people with more power and more money. They do dirty work, but they're working for others. And that, again, is talked about in Haiti, but it never gets talked about in the mainstream media at all. So you get to this situation now where these proposals are being made, some of the media, well, the Globe and Mail specifically, the Globe and Mail said Biden is asking Trudeau to lead an intervention. And that's been going on for a few months now. Trudeau seems to be not jumping to that bait, which is probably a good thing. And what may happen would be some sort of more technical kind of intervention, like what they've done before, and it didn't work, with beefing up the Haitian police, but it satisfies a political urge if it doesn't resolve Haiti's real problems. All of this goes on while there is a perfectly valid, and you've already talked about this in this program, there's a perfectly valid civil society proposal, the so-called Montana Group, named after a hotel where they met, that's been on the table for more than 2 years, that would get at some of those issues around power and violence, and how to get to free and fair elections finally. The last several elections have not been free and fair. They've been manipulated by, again, that rich sector, and you get these results that don't meet the expectations of the Haitian people. So again, like around Haiti, taking 30,000 migrants out of the large pool isn't going to solve the problems. Fixing the police isn't going to solve the problems. What we need to kind of go back to are the proposals that come from people's organizations that come together and talk about this stuff and come up with real viable proposals. That's where we need to get back to.
So how do we how do we take that? Because certainly the audience watching this program knows that's where my work is. We come back to social movements, labor movements consistently. That is a consistent theme in almost every episode it comes up to. And Raul, that is specifically your work. And I mean, you know, I think at one point we were all talking that, Raul, you brought this up, that in our conversation with Marco, that this wasn't a civil society meeting. It was a meeting of heads of state. There was no one at any of those meetings that was outside of the business world, the political world. There were no indigenous people and their issues represented at this Tres Amigos summit. There were no labor representatives. There were no women's issues brought up. It was really, to me, came down to being a business summit, a continuation of neoliberal practices. And how do we do that, specifically with Trudeau mentioning investment like NAFTA, with interest in the semiconductor industry. Now, of course, most of us know that the lithium in Mexico has been nationalized. There's a certain it's convoluted with the energy grid, but that is in the process of being nationalized. Mexico is really focused on national sovereignty under this president, natural resource sovereignty, and creating an economy beneficial to the majority of its citizens. That seems antithetical to me to the opinions and the wish list or the to-do list that Trudeau and Biden brought to the summit on January 10th. It seems that there's, and perhaps AMLO is trying to be the bridge between what he and other presidents throughout Latin America and the Caribbean want, particularly the newly elected governments. Most people throughout the hemisphere in the last 16 months did vote for those three things. Again, national sovereignty, natural resource sovereignty, and an economy benefiting the majority of the citizens. Exactly. Some of those economies are like one step to the left, social democrat, and some of the philosophy is revolutionary left. It's a spectrum of economies that people voted for, or the hope of creating. So what really was this summit? And maybe it really, I mean, nobody's really talking about it, because it seems to me, and I say nobody's talking about it now because there really did seem to be this, choke between AMLO and what his vision is and what he seems to be at least standing firm, and then what the other two North American countries want.
Yeah. I think what AMLO has proposed, and I think it's worth more serious consideration than it's got, certainly from the United States or Canada, is a kind of a development, a new kind of development, but better development than the past, certainly in Central America. But I think the same prescription could be offered elsewhere. It would have to be a people's-led development. The kind of conversation that they had at the CELAC meeting in Mexico City, almost a year ago. That to me,
September of 2021.
Is that when it was? Yeah. It was.
Yeah.
So that kind of approach is, I think, closer to AMLO's heart. Now, he had to.
I agree.
He had to live in a conversation where Biden wanted to talk about migration, and Trudeau wanted to talk about energy, and Trudeau with Biden kind of had only one thing on his mind, and that was this whole thing of the U.S. industrial strategy. So this kind of buy American or buy at home, and like one other thing that was like completely overlooked was that Mexico and Canada had a bit of a victory over the United States in one of those trade. God, the proper words here, the trade arbitration panels, exactly over that U.S. protectionism. But you look in vain for reporting of that in North America. It is in the Mexican media, but not in the North American media. But again, so like, I think for Mexico and Canada, always dealing with the, what Trudeau's father used to talk about, the elephant in the bed, he said. It's like you're dealing with the United States, the massive power of the United States, the economic power. So I think from Trudeau's perspective, he went in like with a kind of a minimal list, and AMLO to avoid deeper conflict. And they both, I think they both kind of came away with at least things didn't get worse. So I found it interesting. Like AMLO's rhetoric with Biden was really interesting, like reviving the 1930s Roosevelt's good neighbor policy was interesting. But Biden immediately responded with this: we're the largest aid provider in the world, but a lot of that aid is military aid.
Right.
And
yeah,
it's not what AMLO was talking about at all.
like
So,
over 70% of it's military aid.
yeah.
So is AMLO being naive, or is he sort of not getting the sense? I mean, it seems like he's trying to play both sides. He wants sort of CELAC and that integration, but CELAC has a very different vision of integration in Latin America than the North American integration that the Three Amigos is proposing. And obviously AMLO's trying to play both sides, but I think it's going to become quite difficult for him to continue in that. And I think doing things like, in my opinion, throwing Haiti under the bus in order to acquiesce the interests of Canada and the US, I think is a real problem. And I think as the Cold War heats up in Europe, and we see that there's that economic hub that we're building in North America, the economic, political, and social, it is really, in my opinion, a way of kind of cutting out China investment and Russian investment in the region. And I think that's going to come to a head pretty soon, where Mexico probably will have to make a decision, because at the CELAC meeting they had the Chinese president there virtually, and it was really about how are we going to integrate the Asian investment in the region. And I think he's going to have to come to a reckoning, because pretty soon it's going to be like, you cannot do that. You're not going to be able to sell cars in the North American market if they have any kind of Chinese investment, if they have any kind of. So I think he's going to, he really needs to make a decision or figure out where he sits. Is he either sitting in CELAC table, or is he sitting in the, CUMSA North American trade table? And because they are two very different tables, and they have two very different agendas. One is militarization, I think, as you said, and the other one is really about regional, economic, and political and social integration. Genuine, anyways.
Well, yeah, I think we all kind of stand in one place in that conversation. For like each country needs to be able to be free to make the choices that are good for its people. I mean, right now there's some initiatives by Russia in Africa that the United States doesn't like, and I think that's why Biden mentioned Africa specifically the other day. And so at the same time as there's this sort of the US still talks about globalization, but what they mean is US domination of the global economy and trade routes, trade patterns, and so on. But the BRICS agenda is still very, very much alive. The CELAC agenda is a different one, and so a multilateral world or unilateral world, we're in that hot and heavy debate right now, and my fear is a bit that the US will keep trying to force other countries through trade rules or sanctions or what have you to follow its line, almost at any cost, and rather than allowing rather than being a good neighbor, recognizing that Latin America is not its backyard or its front yard, it's its own yard. Each country is sovereign. Be a good neighbor, respect people. Yeah.
This is, I think that, you're talking about neighbor, just makes me think of fences. And There's a
Yeah.
3,000-mile fence, a border wall, a line on the map between the United States and Mexico, or even, goes right through North America, Mexico, to the south of US and Canada. And sometimes we don't take that into account when it comes to, economic, military, foreign policy issues. Mexico has a different place literally on the map where it sits compared to countries further south. And when you have a neighbor as aggressive as the United States, there's just that that you can't help but define your politics unless you're really prepared to do something really, really aggressive. So AMLO has that to contend with. He can't just ignore these two countries to the north. He does, and I agree with you, Jim. And I would say again, I know I've shared this with all of you watching. I've shared this a couple times. That CELAC summit in Mexico City, September 18th, 2021. It's on YouTube. It was 5 hours plus in length, I think, one full day.
Yeah.
It's really, really some good viewing to see where so many presidents and foreign ministers stand. And I would say, with the exception, even the right-wing ones are unified on some of these trade things and on health things as well. There were a couple right-wingers. I think Uruguay and Paraguay were real holdouts, real almost nasty, I would say, in their comments. But there is an integration that already exists. I personally feel Latin America's integrated to a degree I've never seen in my lifetime, principally based on humanitarianism, and that coming out of the lack of response to COVID-19, specifically by the United States, but the global north in general. But when you have such a huge, prosperous nation to the north of you, and you get very, very little to no assistance, that really made everybody sort of relate to each other in a way I haven't seen. It's beyond politics now to a certain degree. It's beyond politics, it's beyond economics, and there's that humanitarian variable in the relationships between the Latin American and Caribbean countries now, with the exception of how people look at Haiti. Haiti always gets thrown over the bus. That's a whole nother conversation. But there's a different there's a different feel in the air.
Yeah, and I think I had a quick look at an Argentinian newspaper today that I like, Página 12. It's a bit like La Jornada in Mexico City, so fairly left. And they cover Peru differently. They cover Brazil differently. They go much more deeply into what's driving, both the right and the popular protests in the Peru case, the popular protests, what's going on in Puno, Cusco, in the highlands, and then looking at in the fascinating article today for somebody who's worked a lot of my time in the religious sector, a really interesting article about right-wing religion in Brazil and the presence of that mindset in the people who assaulted the Congress the other day. Just like I feel so privileged that I can get access to a much broader range of news information than what comes through, the CBC in Canada or even PBS in the United States. You all know this too, but I really encourage people to look as broadly as you can for different voices, because the real news is what's going on in the streets of Peru right now. The real news is what's going on, Lula, the newly elected president of Brazil. I mean, his response to that coup attempt, the takeover of the Congress, is to mobilize the popular movements again. He goes to his base. AMLO here in Mexico always says, the mainstream media won't cover me, but there are these social networks. And people, so WhatsApp, whatever he says gets
Well,
spread
and
through
he
the
has
country.
those morning talks every single morning, which
yeah.
Biden and Trudeau got a little bored with. That did
Yeah,
come out in the media. He has
like
those
you can-
morning talks on Twitter every morning.
Yeah, I watch those not every day, but quite often too. And it's like he gets criticized for those, like it takes up a lot of time and space, and maybe it gets a bit dull, but it's a way of being accountable with the people. And so he gets his ministers up there and they have to say, well, this is what we're doing with security. This is what we're doing with the military. This is what we're doing with that Guardia Nacional. This is what happened in Sinaloa, and he asks them questions. They're kind of put on the spot. Wow, I would love to see other cabinet ministers do that in other countries with their boss.
Well, we saw. Oh, go ahead, Raul. After you.
No, I said it's also a great way of breaking through sort of that mainstream media that kind of controls the message, as you said, Jim, and it's not really reporting on the issues or not in depth anyways, and it's kind of very superficial. So it really allows, like I was interviewing folks on the Peru issue, and really in the rural areas, it's the community radios that gets the message across, because many people don't trust the mainstream media anymore. They find that it's, they're not doing their job, they're not covering issues critically, they're not at the events, and so people are really going to social media, going to community radios, going to alternative media, just to be able to get and understand really what's going on in a lot of these complicated issues.
I mean, I'll say again, I think we did all see in the mainstream media that, was it Wednesday or after the post Tres Amigos summit where AMLO, did one of his maybe it was Wednesday morning, did his talk, and you could see Trudeau and Biden kind of rolling their eyes, just really not used to that sort of communication. And, and they do go on lengthy, but that's a style thing. And, and it appeals to his people. And so it was just, to me, that was just another contrast within, the summit itself, that type of communication was anathema to these two other leaders. They just didn't, they didn't get it. To me, that kind of summed a lot of the other things up. So, you guys, we've been talking for almost an hour, and our audience has been so fabulous. They've stayed with us. And a shout out to those of you on the Convo Couch. You've just been really engaged in the chat tonight, and I've tried to keep up with all of you. And can I just mention that all of the information for all of our speakers, including Jim, who's joined us now, in the program description, when you click on and it says more, everything's in there, a description of the program, all the links for everybody's social media, and links to all the organizations that everybody works for as well. So, and a shout out to you, Karen, for helping me keep up with all of those links. So I appreciate that. So what should we share with the audience with a few minutes of closing? I mean, is this summit going to continue? Is it? I will just share my little quick summary. To me, it was a demonstration of old school versus new school. Jim, you said unilateral versus multilateral. To me, it was a real example of old world that perhaps is fading or is going to reconstruct as the international community or preservation of the West, and this clear emergence of what's happening south of the U.S. border, clear emergence of a new philosophy, new way of building the Americas.
I'm curious just to hear a little bit from Jim around Canada's foreign policy towards Haiti, because I think Canada plays a unique role in that, and I know Jim, you have a lot of experience in that. And I think Canada's role in Haiti is quite unique in terms of how it, deals with it. And, Canada's going to be sending military vehicles, training the police. It's always been making sure that, popular democratic movements don't succeed in Haiti. So maybe talk a little bit about that, and then whatever else you want. And then I'll just.
Yeah. Thanks for coming back to that. I just quickly, I mean, one thing that did impress me was like, I don't know, September, October, it was like lead a military intervention, lead a military intervention, lead a military intervention. And then people like us and the Haiti solidarity groups in Canada protested, and it's kind of like some of the groups that were maybe divided 20 years ago or a dozen years ago are kind of coming together, and they're on the same page right now and saying no military intervention. The government seems to have heard that, and that's why they're talking now about police and so on. I don't know that that's the right answer. I really doubt it, but I do know that the right answer is the civil society one. Like, let me be clear, the Montana group proposal. That one, that's what we should be pressing for, is like, listen to the voices of Haitian civil society, and the Canadian government still hasn't got that message. They're still on this police track, and I think they need to get off the police track and onto Haitian-led solutions, proposals for solutions, because I think that worked in 1987 and 1990. It could have worked again many times since then, but hasn't been allowed to. It needs to be.
That's the key word, isn't it? Hasn't been allowed to.
Hasn't been allowed to.
Yeah.
You know, the solutions that come from Haitian trade unions and women's movement and the human rights organizations, the farmers organizations. Those are the groups that I know well in Haiti, and they're the ones that are proposing they call it a passerelle, like a boarding ramp to get onto a ship, like towards elections. That's what they want, and I think they should be heeded, and not these militaristic solutions. That ultra-rich group needs to be dealt with. The gangs will need to be dealt with, but the way forward to dealing with those issues is by hearing the voices of civil society.
So, and somebody in our chat was asking me, this was quite a while ago up in the chat, about about solutions. And I think that's what I put in the chat, social movements. And thank you, Jim, for because
yeah,
it really is it's gonna be us people that make the change.
Haiti, Montana group in Google, and you'll get the civil society proposals fairly easily.
Well, we
and it's
have
also very clear.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Raul, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Karen.
I'm going to say we both have, both Canada and Mexico support, at least in general terms, U.S. policy towards Haiti. And that's and what's the link again, Jim? Haiti, Montana?
Yeah, like look for, in the search mode, just look for Haiti Montana group, or Haiti Montana civil society. You'll find proposals there, and I could send you.
I'll put it in the chat.
Oh, I could send you a decent article about it later.
Okay, I'll share that with everyone if you do.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
So Raul, I intervened. Sorry.
No problem. I think my analysis of this, it's pretty much a lot of the same old. Really, I didn't hear much. It all sounds really good on paper. If you look at the working plan that Canada and Mexico put together, it's reconciliation with Indigenous people, gender equality, women's empowerment, anti-racism, all these really great sounding documents. But the reality is, Canada needs an independent foreign policy from the US, and it has to be focused on, human rights, labor rights, but also democracy. We have stopped supporting democratic social movements in the region, and we really want to support only democratic processes that benefit our economic and political interests. Mm-hmm. And a perfect example are, countries like Peru, right? If you get someone who overthrows a government that we think is too leftist, is corrupt, whatever, as long as that current government is to our political, economic interests, then we will support. So I think that's where there was no talk about democracy, real democracy. If there was, we would be supporting civil society in Haiti. As Jim said, that would be the key thing. But that's exactly what Canada, the US, they don't want. I won't speak for Mexico because I know they have a different vision, but really that's what they don't want. They don't want civil society, popular movements controlling the economic and the political agenda of these countries, because they know that won't equal, investment rights. It won't equal corporate rights, which is what Canada and the US really are pushing forward in these trade, in these kind of regional integration talks. And so for me, it's a lot of the same old. Nothing much is changing. It all sounds great, but in reality, it's the same interest: militarization, corporate interest, capital flows. That's really the most important components for Canada, the U.S., and to some extent Mexico, unfortunately, as well.
Yeah, this goes back to what we were saying at the outset, and with Marco, is like looking at causes of migration. If migration is Biden's big problem, then he needs to have a different approach to Haiti. He needs to have a different approach to Venezuela and Cuba. He needs to have a different approach around development. He needs to get rid of the sanctions. He needs to support civil society proposals that would employ more people and guarantee them better salaries than these semiconductor supply chain things that they are addressing. It's just, we can do this
Which is
better.
basically just more on the war against China, taking that part of their economy away from them and bringing it home. Yeah. Can I just throw out real quick? You mentioned, Marco and immigration, and for the audience, Marco had a great article that he wrote, was published in Newsweek on the 7th or 8th, so a day or two before the Tres Amigos Summit started, and it is called Solving Immigration Starts, and this follows right up on your comment, Jim. The article is Solving Immigration Starts with Helping Families Feel Safe at Home. And that is educationally safe, healthcare safe, violence safe, all of those things that we associate with, a secure and form of a quality life. And the article goes into all of that. That also is in the program notes, the link to that article. So maybe we should wrap it up. And I'm so thankful that all of you were able to join. It's always fun to co-host with Raul and Jim. Just what a delight to finally see and talk with you. It's been so long. So yeah. I'm really glad you had to join us.
We'll have to find each other in Mexico City sometime.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes, sure. I'll let you know. That'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah, we'd love to see you there. So, and then also a big shout out to Marco Castillo of Global Exchange, who graciously gave us Raul and I his time yesterday. So everyone, thank you for joining a really great chat tonight. So I really appreciate you tuning in and being engaged on all these issues throughout Latin America. It's really nice to have a space, and a real shout out to the Convo Couch for letting us join their YouTube channel of, I don't know, I think there's almost 50,000 of you subscribers. And
wow.
It's really nice to have a space where we can go into some of these issues in Latin America and the Caribbean in depth and from a non-US mainstream perspective. So really, really thankful for that. And for our the other YouTube channels we have access to, Code Pink Action and Popular Resistance Org, and of course to all of our broadcast partners. And let me just read them out to all of you again. Black Alliance for Peace, Haiti America's Team, Code Pink, Common Frontiers, Council on Hemispheric Affairs, Friends of Latin America, Interreligious Task Force on Central America, Massachusetts Peace Action and Task Force on the Americas, and Popular Resistance for housing our project and allowing us to work with all these terrific broadcast partners. We have a really wonderful coalition built around this project, and everyone contributes so enormously. And Common Frontiers with Raul Burbano is one of those partners. So everyone, thanks for tuning in, and please be sure to watch us next Thursday, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, and you can also catch the audio as a podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Google. So we'll see you.
Thank you very much, Terry.
Thank you. We'll see you all next week.
Thanks, Jim. Bye.
Thanks. Take good care.